You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and it is that time of the week again where we make our picks for week number 6 of the UFL. Now, a big disclaimer, just so you are all aware. I am currently on vacation at the time of you seeing this. I'm recording this at 3:20 p.m. on Monday of this week, so there's going to be things that I can't really account for in terms of like practice time, people missing some of that practice time this week, potential inactives and whatnot. So I'm aware of that. I still wanted to make the picks and talk with you all about what I think about these games. So just keep that in mind as I'm diving through. If you hear me talking about someone who ends up being inactive come Thursday or Friday, well, the reason being I did not know. I don't see into the future, even though I'm pushing this into the future to you all. That being said, we've got 4 games on tap to go over. I just finished off last week with a 4-0 perfect weekend, and we are now sitting at 12-8. I finally got away from the 500 hell that I've been living in, and now we make some picks, starting off with the first matchup between the Birmingham Stallions and the Memphis Showboats. A rivalry renewed once again. We have ourselves this one at Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. This time the Showboats are hosting the Birmingham Stallions, and this is kind of a matchup nightmare for Memphis here as they try to avenge their Week 3 33-14 loss to Birmingham. Memphis comes in leading the league in offensive turnovers right now, currently sitting at 9, and the last thing you want to be doing is giving Birmingham any more opportunities than they already get on offense. So the best thing you can do going into this game here is protect the football, especially against Birmingham. They love to wreak havoc defensively, and you do not want to give them an opportunity to take that football away from you. Establishing some sort of rushing attack should be a priority. Now, that's not necessarily the easiest thing against Birmingham, definitely an easier said than done type of thing. They are first in yards per game allowed on the ground with only 50, but you can't just rely on the passing attack, and I think that has become abundantly clear over there in Memphis. You've got to balance out this offense and try to run the football a little bit more. The best thing you can really do is just eat up clock, try to take up as much time of possession as possible to prevent Birmingham from getting the football. So lean into Darius Victor in your running back room and try to get them the football some more. Defensively, it almost just kind of feels like you're going into this game bracing yourself. Birmingham's currently netting about 367 yards per game right now on offense, which is good for best in the UFL, and they're scoring at 26.4 points per game, which is good for second. So brace yourself. Do the best you can, but this is an offense that has been dominating defenses and kind of just imposing their will. And that'll obviously vary a little bit depending on who winds up being the quarterback for Birmingham this week, but it's just something you kind of have to prepare for. The good thing is Birmingham is good for about a turnover a game or so, so if you can win that turnover battle, protect the football on your end, and maybe take advantage of a mistake or two from Birmingham's offense, you might have your opportunity to steal a possession, maybe put some points on the board and keep the game close, and maybe find an opportunity similar to like what DC found themselves in a couple of weeks ago, but maybe actually come away with the win. It's a long shot, but there is the opportunity. On the Stallions side, and again, I'm recording this on Monday, so it's too early for me to know who the quarterback is going to be. I'm kind of on the assumption that it's going to be Matt Corral, as they've just flip-flopped back and forth between quarterbacks, even though I firmly believe that Martinez needs to be the guy that starts for Birmingham the rest of the way here as they make their push for the championship. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen until we actually know. After watching Birmingham go for over 200 yards last week rushing, I do think that's something that we could see them try to do again here. Maybe they don't quite hit 200 yards rushing, or maybe they do, but Memphis is currently allowing about a 4.7 yard per attempt average, which is good for second most in the UFL right now, and 94 yards per game on the ground. So you have a good opportunity to move the football, and with the dominance that we've seen from Birmingham, especially up front in that O-line, running lanes open up, and they open up in wide margins. So I would not be surprised to see them go after it on the ground again this week. On the defensive side of the things for Birmingham, one of the most dominating defensive fronts in the UFL right now with 18 sacks, and they also have 22 tackles for loss recorded as well. I'm expecting more of that this weekend. Memphis's offensive line hasn't necessarily been the greatest by any means, and on top of that, they're going to be putting this Memphis offense to the test. Birmingham has only allowed 6 touchdowns so far this season. That's a literal average of 1 touchdown allowed per game, which is tied for the lowest in the UFL. And Memphis themselves have only scored 8 total touchdowns, which is just like a hair over 1 touchdown a game. So they're definitely going to put this Memphis Showboats team to the test, and I don't quite think that Memphis is going to be up for that test, to be completely honest with you all. And so with that, for my first pick of the week, I am going to go with the favorites in the Birmingham Stallions. This is just going to be a tough matchup for Memphis, and I don't really think they match up well in terms of roster and schemes. So I do think I like the Stallions, and I have them winning 30-17 fairly handedly. It feels like Birmingham is really kind of finding themselves, and there is a piece of me right now that has a lot of hope and maybe just a slight thought that maybe we do get Adrian Martinez again. After just seeing what he's done the last 2 starts he's had, this offense in Birmingham is just completely different. It's so much better when he is in at quarterback, and I almost feel like at this point Skip Holtz can't ignore that. But if he wants to continue to give both his guys the opportunity to play, to give them tape, like there is a bigger picture to this whole UFL thing, and I respect the hell out of Skip Holtz for keeping that in mind. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Matt Corral again, but part of me hopes we get some more Adrian Martinez this week. The second matchup we're going to dive into, this game going to be at 3 p.m. You'll find it on Fox, still on Saturday. We have the Houston Roughnecks heading into St. Louis to take on the Battlehawks. And I've got to say, a little bit worried about the Roughnecks in this one here. St. Louis comes in, absolute roll. They have the best scoring offense in the UFL right now, averaging just over 30 points per game on offense. And I'll be very interested in seeing how St. Louis handles this Houston's pass defense. The reason I say that is because despite the struggles that they have, they are actually currently 2nd in passing yards per game allowed. They're also tied for 3rd in passing touchdowns allowed. So for all the woes and, not so great things we've been seeing from Houston so far this season, there is some positive and some light in that darkness that they have there. But A.J. McCarron, the stud he is, currently sitting at 10 touchdowns, leading the league in passing, and then only 1 interception, as St. Louis is the only team right now with 1 interception. Everyone else, 2 or more through the season so far. He's a model of quarterback efficiency in the UFL, and I will be very interested in seeing how that matchup goes. After Birmingham went for over 200 yards rushing last week, I also think that there's a good opportunity with the success that St. Louis has been finding on offense that we see them kind of go after it on the ground as well. Like, this might be one of those games where they're winning from both the ground and through the air. St. Louis is currently 3rd in rushing yards per game, and on top of that, they're tied for 1st in rushing yards per attempt with Birmingham. So there's a good chance that we just see St. Louis kind of repeat what they just did last weekend. There's a very good possibility of that. On the defense, I've got to say I'm really impressed with the way St. Louis has kind of rounded things out and kind of reached that complete form that they've been working towards. It was a little bit of a back and forth kind of figuring themselves out type of things like the first 3 weeks or so, but the last couple of weeks have been very good for the St. Louis Battlehawks defensively. They're now currently ranked 1st in passing yards per game allowed and 3rd in rushing yards per game allowed. They do both things very, very well. And as long as they're winning on 3rd down, I do really think that there's an opportunity for this to be a runaway type of game for St. Louis. Houston's one of the worst 3rd down offenses in the league right now, and they don't do a ton of things very great offensively. So it's going to be a long matchup for them, in my opinion. On the Roughnecks side, I think that their best chance of winning this football game really is through just ultimately ball control and limiting time of possession for St. Louis. When you look at St. Louis right now, they are the 3rd best when it comes to maintaining the ball and eating up clock as they sit there and just dominate you on the offensive side of the ball. And currently right now, they're ranked 2nd worst in terms of time of possession allowed on defense. So doing your absolute best to just try and control the football offensively and not put the ball in St. Louis's hands is probably the most, it's very plain, it's a very simple idea, but it's kind of like what you need to lean into. This Houston Roughnecks offense is not known for lighting up the board, and it's probably in their best interest to try to keep scores low for them to be able to come out victorious. Like, even in the one victory that they have this year was not very high scoring affair, and I think that's probably how they're going to win football games if they do win any more going through the rest of the season. I'd hope to see them try to maybe establish the run a little bit earlier and just try to keep the ball out of St. Louis's hands. It really hasn't been where I don't think it's been as good as I think some people anticipated, even myself included, with the return of Mark Thompson here. I mean, 45 yards, 3.5 yards per attempt and a touchdown in the only 2 games he's played so far. I believe in the talent that Mark Thompson has. Do not get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying that he's washed or anything like that. But there is definitely a bit of a letdown with his return here, and I think everyone's been kind of hoping for a little more oomph. So lean into him. I'm not going to sit here and act like what happened last year didn't happen last season, and I know it's a new year, it's a different thing, but I believe in the Thompson. I believe in the talent Mark Thompson has, and I do think that continuing to try to run the football with him and just commit to it a little bit more early on is probably in your best interest. And then defensively, I mean, disrupting the quarterback has probably been the biggest issue for Houston right now. They're currently tied for last with only 9 sacks this season. So if you can disrupt A.J. McCarron, again, you can give yourself a shot, and that's probably all you can really ask for. You've got to generate some pressure. You've got to disrupt the rhythm that A.J. McCarron's been able to get into in basically every single game this season. And I think the prime example of that is that game against the Michigan Panthers from earlier this season. That was probably the lone game where we saw the St. Louis offense kind of stumble and struggle to sort of figure themselves out and get into a rhythm, and it was because of how disruptive Michigan's pass rush was. So if you can find some of that in this game, there is a slimmer of hope for you. Not very big, but there is some hope there. That being said, I'm having a really hard time trying to talk myself into a Houston Roughnecks victory in this one here, so I am leaning the St. Louis Battlehawks, and to be completely honest with you all, I'm not 100% sure that this game can be very close just based off of where these two teams currently are in the season. I have St. Louis kind of running away with this one, 34-13. I've been trying to keep games in like realistic score lines, but the way the Stallions game is lining up now, and also this game here, it feels like we got a couple of blowouts on our hands, and we've already seen a handful of them get pretty ugly, so this kind of feels like we might be gearing up for another couple of those on the Saturday games. Moving into game number 3, though, we've got ourselves the Arlington Renegades taking on the Michigan Panthers. Now, Arlington, I don't really know what the answer is going to be as far as notching your first victory. We're halfway through the season right now, but with another loss here, Arlington will be essentially all but eliminated from the playoffs. And I honestly think if things break the right way, they might be completely eliminated. I could be wrong on that, but I think with a loss this weekend, that might be it for any playoff hopes. So there is that kind of weighing on your shoulders here at 0-5. The good news is Michigan's defense has shown that you can throw the football against them. They have allowed the 3rd most passing yards in the league so far. And with Arlington averaging 224 passing yards per game, which is best in the UFL, there is an opportunity for you to take advantage of that and maybe move the football through the air. It is your bread and butter. Luis Perez is among the better quarterbacks in the UFL. So there is some good news going into a matchup here against a tough opponent on their home turf. Something to keep in mind. Now, none of this really matters if they can't score touchdowns, as we currently are kind of dealing with right now in the aftermath of, again, it being Monday as I'm recording this. Arlington managed to move the ball for 270 yards through the air, minus sacks. It was like 255, something like that. So, I mean, even if you're able to move the football effectively, if you're not getting into the end zone, it doesn't really matter. So being currently tied for 7th in offensive touchdowns, you've got to finish off these drives or your season's going to be finished. You absolutely need to get into the end zone this week. That is your goal. No settling for field goals, taking what the defense gives. No, you got to be a little bit more aggressive. Your season is essentially on the line now. I want to see 4th down attempts. If you're in the red zone, forget about kicking the field goals. What do you really have to lose? The season is almost lost at this point. You might as well just put all the cards on the table that you have and go all in. Give it your best shot and see what you can do. On the defensive side of things, this is the league's worst run defense, and you're basically getting tasked with trying to figure out how to stop Wes Hills and Matt Colburn, who went for 150 yards, I think it was last week. So best of luck to them. It's the only defense in the UFL allowing more than 100 yards rushing per game, and they're sitting at 125. So they are well in the lead of that pole position there. And so if you can't really slow down what Michigan's going to be doing on the ground, going to be a tough one. So you've got to figure something out there. They have got to find a way to mitigate the rushing attack that Michigan's probably going to employ after finding so much success with it last weekend. And on the Panthers side of things, in all caps here on my notes, run it down their throats. As I just said, this is the lone defense in the UFL right now that is allowing over 100 yards per game on the ground, and it's well over 100 yards. So if there's anything you're trying to do in this game, it's handing the football off to both Wes Hills and Matt Colburn, because I think last week we finally got a view of what I really think that this backfield can be. If there's 3 guarantees in life, it is that you are going to die, you are going to pay your taxes, and Arlington's going to allow over 100 yards rushing. Put the ball into your running back's hands and let them dominate, because they have a very good opportunity to this weekend. On the defensive side of things, basically, if you can disrupt what Luis Perez does from the pocket, you can kind of shut down Arlington, and I think we've seen that to this point now. It's very simple what you have to do with them. He had 7 sacks last week. We've seen this defensive pass rush bring a ton of pressure in various games this season in Michigan. We know they have the ability to get after the quarterback and wreak some havoc. So if you can go in and get after Luis Perez, make him uncomfortable, you can force him into mistakes. Arlington essentially lives and dies by being able to throw the football. So if they can't throw the football, I'm not putting a ton of stock in them. And if they just swallow up the O-line, Perez is going to go with it, and I don't really think Arlington stands a chance. And that being said, unfortunately, Arlington fans, I'm sorry, but I think the season, in terms of playoff hopes, ends here with a 25-18 loss to the Michigan Panthers. I really wish that this wasn't the way things would have gone for the defending XFL champions. I think it would have been a lot more fun to see the defending champions improve this year and do even better than their 4-6 record, but it seems like they are on pace to have an even worse season after their championship run last year. So it'll be a very shock upset type of win if Arlington pulls it off. I'm not saying that there's a 0% chance they have it. There's always a chance, especially in football, but the way Arlington has been playing both offensively and defensively, the consistency is not there on the offensive side of the ball. The defense has just been downright awful all season long, and I'm having a really hard time figuring out what the actual route to success is going to be for Arlington in this back half of the season. And then finally, to wrap up the picks for this week, final game of the weekend on Sunday. This one's at 4 p.m. You'll catch it on Fox. We have ourselves the San Antonio Brahmas going into D.C. to take on the Defenders. And with this one here, the Brahmas, really good opportunity to have a bit of a bounce back week with Quinton Dormady. 3 interceptions was not a great game for him. Thankfully, the running game was just fantastic for you, and you're able to take advantage, and it ultimately led to a victory here. But you can't get away with throwing 3 interceptions every single week. You can barely get away with throwing a single interception, let alone 3. So taking care of the football is definitely going to be something that we need to see from San Antonio and from Quinton Dormady specifically. Now, as I was saying, kind of a good matchup for San Antonio because they do love to throw the football, and DC allows the most passing yards per game right now in the UFL. And the good news for Dormady, coming off that 3 interception game, DC has yet to record a single interception this season. So go ahead, fire up Dormady. Let's get Jontre Kirkland, Marquez Stevenson involved, feed them the football. And odds are DC's probably not going to pick you off no matter what you do because they have yet to figure out a way to do it even once this season. DC has also not been great against the run, so after a couple of strong performances in 2 of the last 3 weeks as far as getting after it on the ground is concerned, you might have yourself another good game from John Lovett, so keep an eye on that. DC allows the 3rd most rushing yards per game, so there is definitely some opportunity for success both on the ground and through the air for the Brahmas. Defensively, for San Antonio, I think winning the battle in the trenches ultimately wins you this football game here, and that's probably the biggest thing that they're going to emphasize. And knowing Wade Phillips, I would be shocked if it's not. When you look at what San Antonio does, second only to Birmingham, they currently have 17 sacks on the season, and they're also currently 2nd in total yards lost off the tackles for loss that they've been able to rack up defensively as well. So they are just an absolute unit up front, and when they're getting you in the backfield, it's for massive chunk plays on top of that. Like, I believe they're sitting on 26 tackles for loss for like over, what is it, like 100 or 127 total yards or something like that. Like they're averaging like 5 yards or something like that or more a loss. It's crazy the number that they're working with right now. DC's been able to be pretty good at protecting Jordan Ta'amu so far this season. They are second lowest in sacks allowed at 9, so it'll be a real big test for DC here, but I do think that the way San Antonio plays and just how aggressive they are up front, DC might be in for a long one here. The other thing I want to mention, because I noticed this as I was kind of running through some numbers and just looking at some stuff, San Antonio needs to clean up the penalties. And this is one of those things where I talked about it in my power rankings, just about like what separates all these teams from each other and kind of like the tier lists that I made up. I basically lumped the top 3 teams, 4 and 5 into a group, and then 6 through 8 in another group. So I had 3 groups altogether. And when I talked about San Antonio, I said that there is like a few things that I feel like kind of separates them just a smidge from the top 2 teams in the league. And I do think that one of the things and one of the issues I have is just the amount of penalties that they find themselves into. And they don't even lead the league in penalties, but it's the type of penalties that they find themselves running into. They currently lead the league right now with 311 total penalty yards. They're the only team over 300 right now. They're averaging, I think it's like 62 yards worth of penalties per game. You've got to clean that up because, again, you're not leading the league in penalties, but you are getting dealt some of the most egregious of the penalties with penalty yards. So just clean that up. Let's relax a little bit and take a little bit of edge off the play. I love how aggressive the defense is, but we need to make sure we're not throwing games away or just giving opportunities to teams that don't necessarily deserve them because you're getting too overly aggressive. On the defender side of things, hasn't been great defensively. DC allowing a league-high 322 yards per game of offense. So they simply just have to tighten up. That's all I really want to say about it. Like we could dive into a lot of different specifics, but there's so many things to point out that getting into the specifics is almost kind of a waste of time. Like just altogether, you need to tighten up on the defense if you want any shot of competing for a potential spot in the UFL playoffs in the next few weeks here. Their biggest hope is that San Antonio is prone to turnovers and making mistakes, so take advantage of it, but you have to protect the football yourselves. And so winning the turnover battle is probably going to be one of the biggest things for DC in this game. If they can take advantage of the mistakes we've seen from San Antonio at times, a la the 3 interceptions we got from Dormady last week, and not turn the football over yourselves, you could put yourself in a position to potentially win this game. I am somewhat anticipating, and I'll be curious to see what happens here. And again, reminder, I am previewing this game. It's Monday. You'll be seeing this on Thursday. I do think there is a shot we may see a new quarterback under center for DC. I feel like through 5 weeks now with what we've seen from Ta'amu, you have DeAndre Francois, you have Jalen McClendon. Like, give somebody else the opportunity to throw the football for you. You're halfway through the season. You're 2-3. You're not in pole position by any means to get yourself into the playoffs. You've got to figure something out, though, and maybe a change at quarterback could be good for you. It could be bad for you. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is the only answer. Changing a quarterback is going to change the future of this team, but it has to be something that you at least consider. Ta'amu's sitting around 50% completion right now. He threw a ton of interceptions last week. Something should maybe at least be considered and looked at going into this next game here. So I do think there's an opportunity that maybe we see a change there. And maybe that could spark something for the offense. Who knows? I will say that to give DC some hope, you are going up against I don't really know if I can even... Unfortunately for DC, there is just not a lot going right going up against a pretty aggressive defense. And I mean, it's just hard for me to try to find like glimpses and glimmers of hope, to be completely honest with you. So I'm not going to just sit here and blow smoke up their asses. I don't think that's really fair from me. One of the more damning things I have listed on here that I haven't even mentioned is that like you're going up against the best third down defense in the league and you're the worst third down offense in the UFL. And on top of that, DC also sits at the lowest total of first downs made this season with 71. So while I'm trying to like pull out little tiny positives to maybe give some hope to DC, it's kind of hard for me to do so when you have just so many things to pull from in terms of negatives to look at here. So I'm sorry, Defenders fans. As somebody who was rooting for the Defenders in the XFL side of things, I'm pretty disappointed in just kind of the situation that they're in right now. And while they are 2-3 and still in the thick of things, I can't imagine that they wind up in the playoffs in the current state that the team is in. So I feel like I just got to say that. That being said, as for who I think is going to be the winner in this game here, I am very heavily leaning San Antonio Brahmas. I do think there is a chance that DC might be able to keep it close, as we saw them do with the Birmingham Stallions a couple of weeks ago. But I ultimately think San Antonio and that defense is just going to be a bit of a problem for DC to handle. So I have San Antonio taking the W 23-16 in a very fun affair to watch, to say the least. But those are my picks going into week number 6 of the UFL. Again, very early in the week for me to be doing this. I like to take some time to really review stuff, but with my vacation coming up, I wanted to make sure I got this out for you all and you had something to take in come Thursday. Really looking forward to see what happens this weekend. Let me know in the comment section down below. What are your picks? How are you looking at this weekend? Who comes out winners? Who comes out losers? All that. Would love to discuss with you all. But that's it for me. As always, greatly appreciate it. If you made it to the very end, I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.